All right, it is now time for the top five trash and player of the week for NFL Week 3. I decided to change it up a little bit and get rid of the best loser segment because I didn't like it to begin with. I thought it was something, I was trying to be different, be cool, be catchy. It's not cool. It's not catchy. It wasn't good. I couldn't. I was just trying to think of like little ways to talk about each individual team a little bit each week, other than the recap. But the best loser segment doesn't work because, especially like this week, I mean, I can't even off the top of my head pick a team that lost great because I mean, if they lost, they lost. I mean, you could look at the Lions and say, oh, maybe they were the best loser, but I mean, really, the segment's lame, so I just got rid of it. And I just, we're gonna do a top five trash and player of the week. So we're gonna start off the top five like we do every week. And last week's top five, I had the Bucks number one, Rams number two, Ravens number three, Chiefs number four, and 49ers number five. Now, this list is going to change a lot. And before I get into it, there's going to be a few teams that aren't on there right now. The 49ers are not in the top five again. The Chiefs obviously are not in the top five after their last couple weeks. The Broncos, if I were doing a top 10, I would probably have them six, but I mean, they haven't beaten a legit team yet. The Packers, I think, would be the seventh team because if you take away that week one and their last 2 weeks of football, I think they've played very well. And then the Cardinals, I don't have them in the top five. They would probably be in the top 10 just because I don't know how I trust that defense. And then Kyler Murray having to do everything. While it's fantastic, it's amazing, it's fun to watch, I'm still a bit iffy on the Cardinals. And then the Raiders. I mean, it's nothing against the Raiders. Even as a Chiefs fan, I'm trying to keep bias out of it. I don't see anything with the Raiders yet. I mean, they would be number 10, but top five. And then the Panthers, again, a team that I don't know much. I don't know enough yet. I mean, we'll see next week whenever they play the Cowboys. I think it'll be a bit of a way to see what the Panthers are a little bit more. Because, I mean, Sam Darnold has been efficient so far this year. But, I mean, their only legit win so far, I think, is against the Saints. Because if you look at the way the Saints defense played against the Patriots, they shut them down. But if you look at the way the Panthers played the Saints, they, dominated them. But they've only beat the Jets, and they beat a backup quarterback with the Texans. So I have to see just a little bit more. But they do have a couple matchups coming up where I think maybe the Panthers can make a case, along with all these other teams. I mean, there's a lot of teams that I think are good, and there's a lot of teams that I think have a chance to get in the top five. And then if I did a top 10, which these lists are very hard to make, I must admit, because I flip flop on teams, because I try to rank them. I'm like, all right, this team is number one. This team would beat this team. This team would beat this team. And so as you go down, the team above would beat the team below. But even that is kind of hard because if you look at the matchups of the teams, you look at a team like the Chiefs, well, they're not going to beat a team that runs the ball a lot. But then you look at a team that only throws. Like, I think if they played maybe a team like Tampa right now who doesn't really run the ball and is struggling, I think they could beat them. A team like the Chargers, even though they lost, I think if the Chiefs didn't have those turnovers, I think they could beat them. So, it depends on the matchup. But let's go ahead and get in the top five, and we'll start off with number five. I have the Browns. They've really only had one bad game to start the season, and even the game wasn't bad. They played the Chiefs really, really tough in week one. And then last week again, and then in week two against the Texans, it was a little close there for a little bit. I mean, Texans played them close, but I mean, this week, I think they finally hit their stride, and I finally think they are a top five team. I mean, the Chiefs game, it was week one. I mean, as you can tell right now, that game seems to be an outlier for both of those teams. But I mean, their defense was amazing. They had 9 sacks against the Bears. I mean, their offensive line is ferocious, and the Matt Nagy didn't do anything to adjust. But they have Chubb Hunt as a great 1-2 punch. They have the third defense when it comes to yards per game, only allowing 200, just a little under 250 yards per game. And as a team, they are just 2 behind the Panthers, who have 14, I believe, and they have 12. So I think the Browns are the 5th team in the NFL. Right now, at number 4, I have the Bills. Now, this is shocking because I didn't know what to do with the Bills last week because score-wise, they dominated them. But to me personally, the score was dominating. The way that they controlled the game defensively was dominating, but their offense, I just didn't feel clicked yet. Boy, did that change in week 3. Their offense clicked and could not be stopped. Once they got going, Emmanuel Sanders, Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, that receiving core is very good in Buffalo. And then you have Josh Allen looking like his MVP form from last year, who, arguably Aaron Rodgers wasn't playing pissed off last year. He could have won MVP. I mean, and then their run defense is really good. They have somewhat of a running game, even though it wasn't completely present against my error against Washington. I mean, they dominated a defense that is supposed to be a top tier defense. So I have the Bills at number 4. Number 3, I have the Ravens. Now the Ravens, I think, again, had a rough week 1, had a very solid week 2, and then week 3, their defense showed up whenever their offense didn't take the day off, but was struggling just a little bit. So if you look at their week 1, they can run the ball. Week 2 can run the ball. This week they didn't run the ball nearly as well. Lamar Jackson, I mean, he had like 60 yards, but that's still relatively decent for a quarterback. I mean, the Ravens probably would have blown out the Lions if it wasn't drops from Hollywood Brown. So I mean, if they can fix their drop issues, catch the ball, if you look at this, Lamar Jackson, you look at the film, it's not on Lamar that this game wasn't, bigger margin of victory, because man, 3 touchdown drop passes. I mean, they only let the Lions have like 16 or 17 points. So it's definitely not on the defense. The offense, again, they made the plays at the end of the game when they needed to. They had that big 4th and very long to get into field goal range, and then they won it with a clutch field goal by Justin Tucker. So, I mean, right now the Ravens, to me, are number 3. But again, I still believe it's the beginning of the season, and these team rankings are very hard to do. And you don't want to overreact week by week. Now, if a team loses by like 50 points, you're like, all right, there's something wrong. But even it's hard. These lists are hard. And I say that because if we look at the number 2 team, we have the Buccaneers. I'm not going to overreact and drop them too many spots. They struggled against the Rams. But if you look at their offense, they have Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Gronk, Antonio Brown when he gets back. They have 3 really good running backs on their good days. And then, once they get healthy, once they get Brown back, I think they're going to be much better. Their defense is injured to what right now. They have JPP out. Their secondary is injured. And I think if they had those players, they would have gotten more pressure on Matthew Stafford, and I think they would have played better. But, I mean, Brady passing-wise, I mean, if you look at the numbers-wise, he couldn't be stopped. Now, score-wise, it says a little bit of a different story because, sometimes garbage time passing yards obviously inflate the number a little bit. But I still think that the Bucs are the number 2 team in football. I still think, they have a very good chance of making the playoffs, maybe the Super Bowl. But my number 1 team, Rams, I think it's going to be damn near impossible to stop this team. They have been playing amazing. Week 1 against the Bears. They played a close game, against the Colts last week. But then just to go out there and to dominate the defending champs like that was awesome. Their defense was awesome. The Buccaneers cannot run the ball against them. Their front 7 is really good in football. You have Floyd, Aaron Darnold. Those guys are very good. Their offense couldn't be stopped. They have 3 or 4 great receivers. They have Kupp, Woods, Higbee, the tight end. You have Jackson, who has speed down the field. That showed. So this Rams team, I think, is going to be very hard to beat this year. And they talked about the Chiefs-Bucks going 20-0, and I'm not saying a team's going to go 20-0, especially in a very tough division that they play in, because coming up, I mean, they have the Cardinals-Seahawks, which are division games that are going to be tough, but then after that they play Giants, Lions, Texans, Titans, who might be a tough. And then, they have 49ers, Packers back-to-back, but then they get the Jaguars again. And then later on they get the Vikings, who we don't know much about. So, I mean, their schedule is a little tough, but I think the way they are playing, they have a very good chance of maybe not going undefeated, but they may only lose 2-3 games and most 4. Like, I don't see that the Rams right now losing more than 4 games, the way that offense is clicking, the way they're playing. So, I mean, the Rams right now are the number 1 team in the NFL. Now let's move on to the trash can of the week, the absolute garbage, the worst of the worst. Before I give it to it, it was really hard for me to pick. I almost went with the Steelers, like, being terrible, but, I mean, that's what they are. That's what they've been for at least since last year when they were 11-0 and the last team to lose, a fluky 11-0, and that's what they've been this year. So I can't give the Steelers the trash, but the actual trash is the Chicago Bears, mainly Matt Nagy, offensive line, just whoever you want to give it to, the Bears. gave up 9 sacks in a game, did nothing to help Justin Fields. They had 47 total yards. They were averaging 1.1 yards per play. It was trash. No adjustments, did nothing to help Justin Fields win. I mean, I've seen opinions all over the place, from the top people at ESPN and Fox and, all these things. Honestly, it may have been intentional. It was that bad. They did nothing to make adjustments, and there is no way that a team can say, "Oh, we tried our hardest." There is an argument that I heard that, you've had Justin Fields since you drafted him, and this is the best you could come up with. That it was pathetic. I don't want to put much on Justin Fields. It was his first start. The team around him has to do a better job of helping him out. This isn't on Justin Fields. I mean, could he have played better? Obviously, he did the right thing, saying I could play better. But come on, they did nothing to help him. So now let's look at our player of the week. And there's, again, like last week, I think there's quite a few honorable mentions. From the one that I'm going to give. But my honorable mentions are Matthew Stafford, had an amazing game again against the Bucs. Mike Williams, who shredded the Chiefs defense. Deshaun Jackson, who, helped the Rams with a couple deep throws from Matthew Stafford. Alexander Madison of the Vikings, who is like Dalvin Cook 2.0, because good God, I mean, for a second there, I was like, I thought Dalvin Cook was out, and I thought it was the same guy. So, I mean, I think Vikings have a good 1-2 punch now, so Alexander Madison's a honorable mention. And then Myles Garrett. That dude had a career day, like 4.5 sacks. And I know I just talked about the Bears being terrible and no adjustments, but come on. 4.5 sacks. It's like Chandler Jones earlier this year having 5 sacks against one team. I mean, yeah, the offensive lines were terrible in those games, but you got to respect it. You have to be physical, and if your opponent isn't going to play physical back, you deserve to get all the love in the world for how well you played. But my actual player of the week this week has to go to Josh Allen. The way that they've struggled the first couple weeks, they lost to the Steelers, which I don't think it is fair because the Steelers are absolutely terrible. And, that was an anomaly. And I honestly think that the Bills are going to be top 3, 4, even top 5 team all season. And then you look last week against Miami, whenever the offense wasn't necessarily being their best, but then you look at their defense and it's been awesome to start the season. And then, this week too, holding, I think I looked up the stat, they were holding Washington to 6 yards a carry, or 6 yards a play, I should say. And then you look at Josh Allen finally clicking. I mean, 358 yards, 4 touchdowns. He looked like MVP form. Like, I feel like he would have to show a little bit more games that he can be good, because you have, Derek Carr, who's had a good start to the season. Quietly, Derrick Henry's having a good start. You've had, a couple other players who are having a really good start to their seasons Kyler Murray, it's going to be hard to say right now who the MVPs are, because it's been all over the place, if you ask me. Because then if you look at Aaron Rodgers, struggled week 1, the last 2 weeks, he's looked like MVP Aaron Rodgers. But you look at Josh Allen, and this dude, I thought he was overhyped for the longest time. I really did. He was really bad, and then he had that playoff game in the first week of the playoffs a couple years ago. They lost, I believe. I can't remember who it was. I wanted to say the Raiders, but that doesn't seem right, but it might have been. And he struggled. And then last year, he had the biggest jump I think I've ever seen a quarterback have, from really bad to really good, just like that. I think this is finally the year that Josh Allen can maybe lead the Bills to this promised land, especially the way that the Chiefs are playing, the top teams in the NFL or the AFC are playing. Right now, for me anyways, it's hard to pick the top teams in the AFC because, the Chiefs are struggling, but then you have the Raiders, who are 3-0. You have the Titans, who had a terrible week 1, but then are having a good, stretch of games right now. So, but Josh Allen, man, props to Josh Allen. That was a very good game against what was supposed to be a top defense, but turns out is not very good. So, Josh Allen is the NFL Week 3 Player of the Week.